Good evening, everyone. My name is Amanda Gunter, and I'm one of the directors here at Brain Balance. And thank you so much for joining us this evening to participate in a webinar called Late, Lost, and Not Prepared. Is it laziness or executive functioning issues? So tonight we have several different ways that you can interact with me. First, we're going to be doing polls is one way that you can interact with me. So the first poll question of the night is, if this is your first time joining us. We always love to hear whose first time is it joining us tonight. Also, if you have a question, there's a Q&A section that you can actually type in your question. And we have moderators on that are actually able to answer questions even while I'm presenting. And then also we have several Brain Balance Centers participating in this evening's webinar. So sure enough, 74% of you guys are saying, yes, this is your first time with us tonight. So welcome, welcome. Now with these centers participating, there is in the chat, there is a texting phone number. Okay, and if you have very specific questions about your child, then I would highly recommend to go ahead and text that question. All right, that is definitely something that will be super helpful for us, is that you can text a specific question in the chat and then they will be able to answer them. So speaking of centers that are participating, we have Chula Vista, Encinitas, Palmdale, Redlands, and San Diego, California. We have Norwalk, Connecticut, Wilmington, Delaware. We have Central Florida, Coral Springs, Jacksonville, Naples, Palm Beach, and West Chase, Florida. We have Peachtree City, Roswell, Swanee, Georgia. We have Plainfield, Indiana. We have Overland Park, Kansas City, and Wichita, Kansas. We have Louisville, Kentucky, Oakland County, Michigan, Woodbury, Minnesota, Omaha, Nebraska, Summit and Bergen County, New Jersey, Plainview, New York, Charlotte and Cornelius, North Carolina, Columbus and Cincinnati, Ohio, Wexford, Pennsylvania, Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, Farragut, Franklin, Tennessee, Allen, Fort Worth, Lubbock, Texas, Midlothian, Glen Allen, and Virginia. And then we have Mequon and Fox Valley, Wisconsin. So again, in the chat, there is a texting phone number, and you can personally text with these directors from these centers. So find your center that's nearest you and go ahead and feel free to text and ask questions specifically about your child. And then also in the Q&A, that is where you can ask questions and our moderators will be happy to answer those questions. So here's our next poll question. Does your child have a formal diagnosis? If so, what is it? Is it ADHD, processing disorder, dyslexia, dysgraphia, or dyscalculia? Is it a generalized anxiety disorder, or is it other? Or maybe there's no formal diagnosis. Actually, many times at Brain Balance, we actually serve a lot of children that do not have a formal diagnosis, but as a parent, you have some concerns where you feel like maybe your child is not able to perform at the highest level of what you think should be taking place. So that is very common in Brain Balance to serve children that don't have a formal diagnosis. And we are a facility that doesn't formally diagnose. So we look at things a little bit different, which we're going to talk about tonight. And so again, executive functioning is a hot topic, right? Because it's back to school. So all of a sudden is your child able to get their homework done, get organized for the next day, get that homework in the book bag, get their clothes ready for the next day, maybe just, hygiene and getting dressed and getting out the door on time. All of those things are examples of executive functioning. So we're going to talk about that tonight, but here we go. Let's see what you guys said. Sure enough, 40% of you guys are saying that there is no formal diagnosis, and then another 32%, you guys have ADHD as a diagnosis. So those are the big ones tonight, and that is actually pretty typical for us. So you're in the right place, and for any diagnosis, you're in the right place, because all diagnoses, if there is a diagnosis of any kind, typically it does impact the development of executive functioning skills. And we're going to talk about that tonight. So first, I always like to start off with, what is executive function? You know, it's a bit of a buzzword, right? But here is what really executive function means. It basically is self-regulation skills that are mental processes that enable us to be able to set and achieve our goals, prioritize and plan tasks, focus and filter out distractions, control our impulses, remember instructions, and be able to juggle and multitask successfully. All right. So it's basically a set of mental processes. All right. Now, here's the thing, is that if your child or young adult is struggling with executive functioning, here are some things that you might be experiencing: difficulty with organizing, planning, and getting started, difficulty processing, storing, and retrieving information, inability to multitask, difficulty with verbal fluency, lack of concern for people and animals, socially inappropriate behaviors, inability to learn from past actions, and just unaware of their behavior is a problem. So those could be some examples of symptoms. All right. And I'm going to give you an example of perhaps an elementary school age child, or even a middle school age child, of what does it mean to have a set of mental processes related to executive function. So here is a bedtime story, which the East Coast is probably about hitting bedtime, right? So the plan is, it's 8 o'clock. Let's get ready for bed. We want our child to wash their face, brush their teeth, put their PJs on, and get in the bed. Something that should be so easy and should only take about 20 minutes. Okay? But how many of you guys experience this? 8 o'clock. What do I do first? Now, this is what they're thinking in their brain. Okay? This is what your child could be thinking in their brain. What do I do first? Do I brush my teeth or wash my face? Boy, I'm thirsty. I want to get some milk. Oh, where's my cup? I don't know where to look. I get so mad. Why is everything so hard? I give up. Better get ready for bed. Where's my PJs? Oh, there's a game under my PJs. Oh no, the game needs batteries. I go to the kitchen to find the batteries. Now I'm playing the game to make sure that the batteries work. Wait, I gotta focus. Where are my pajamas? Wait, I forgot to get a drink. I go back downstairs. Mom gets me a drink, but she is getting mad. I better get in bed quickly, but I forgot to brush my teeth. Oh, well, it's too late. Oh no, I forgot to do my homework. I forgot to tell mom. It's too late now. Mom's going to be so mad. I can't sleep. My mind is racing. I'll try to do my homework. Where's my book bag? Oh no, it's 11:30 and mom checks on me and I'm still awake and she's mad at me again. That is an example of a lack of executive functioning where the mental processes is going in multiple directions. Here's a question for you. Where do you feel like your child struggles most with executive functioning skills? Perhaps it's the morning routine. Perhaps it's at school, the night routine, or all of the above. Here's an example, while you're answering that question, here's an example of a high school or a middle school student, okay? The symptoms can be that they need multiple reminders or assistance to finish a task completely. They forget things related to school and home. They forget turning in their homework even if they complete it. They fail to complete school assignments. They're overreactive. They have difficulty changing plans. They're not learning from previous mistakes. And you as a parent feel like you're a broken record. Maybe you're starting to feel like you're a helicopter parent where you're constantly having to micromanage, create lists for them. They may have inappropriate social situations. They may blurt out in class. They may interrupt, and maybe they're trying to tell you a story and you're trying to follow that story, and yet they can't really do it from the beginning to the end. Oftentimes we see an increase of my way or the highway when it comes to thinking, where you have more rigid thinking, and that can put a strain on family relationships. Friendships can become really stressful because as the child becomes older, their friends start seeing that they're struggling, or they're having a hard time reading facial expressions or reading the room and reading situations. Oftentimes, middle schoolers and high schoolers that struggle with executive functioning, they could easily be taken advantage of. So that's something you have to be aware of. And then school life, their grades are impacted because they're missing assignments. They have poor test taking. They know the information, but applying it is very difficult. Of course, at this age, right, the teachers are no longer providing extra support at school. And so it can become extremely overwhelming. And students often will start skipping school or intentionally avoiding homework because it's like, what's the point? I'm already so behind, right? So that's an example of a middle school, high school. And then we have the example of a young adult or college. So now, if you have a high schooler, you're beginning to think about independence, right? You're beginning to think about what's next after high school. But oftentimes it starts in high school where you see a decline in motivation, you see the absent-mindedness taking place, there's inconsistency in communication, there's difficulty with multitasking, there's difficulty with time management, and they're constantly forgetting and losing things. And then if they make it to a secondary education like college, there's such a high risk of these kids coming home. All right. So then you have a failure to launch situation, or maybe failing to launch is the situation at hand where you can't even imagine your child being away at college or at a trade school. Their social systems are very much surface level oftentimes as they're young adults, because they have difficulties with keeping commitments, right? So that's something that can be difficult and can form struggles in relationships. And then it impacts their ability to maintain a job, right? Because they could be late constantly. They also just get frustrated at work and they quit because there's a lack of resilience. We're seeing that more and more. And then also they're missing deadlines. So if they're missing deadlines in high school and even in middle school with assignments, what does that mean in adulthood? Because we all know as working people, right, that oftentimes you have deadlines. You have to organize your day. You have to prioritize what's important. So let's see what the poll said. It says, where did you feel like your child struggles with executive functioning? And sure enough, 54% of you guys say all of the above, that it's in the morning routine, that it's at school, that it's in nighttime routine. And that's oftentimes what we hear. We often hear that that is something that is problematic. And yet you're not alone. That's the point that I want you to know, is that you're not alone, that many parents are at a place where they're really struggling and feeling like they're having to micromanage their child. So here's the next poll question. All right, when did you feel like the struggle started? Do you feel like it was elementary, middle, high, college, or adult? And then also, when did you begin to see the struggles? So where are they currently? Sorry, first question is, where are they currently in school? And then the second question is, when did you see that they began struggling? And all to say that when you start off and you're seeing symptoms in elementary school, typically they get worse in middle school. It may look different, it may change, but yet it's more of a challenge, because as we know, as your child becomes older, the level of independence that's required increases. Where there's a lot of support in the early years of academics, but then they hit third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, and by the time they're in sixth grade, they're writing down their own homework assignments. They're responsible for bringing home everything they need to complete that. And then, of course, in high school, they're really trying to prepare them for secondary education. So many times your child will have to be looking on websites or looking at the high school portal to be able to get the information they need to be able to stay up with everything that's due and all the assignments that are due. So sure enough, 46% of you guys say you began to see this, or that your child is currently in elementary school. 22% are you guys say that your child's in middle school, and 21% high school. But 90% of you guys said that this is where you started seeing it was elementary school. And that is definitely common, that basically as they get older, things can become more challenging. So here's the thing, executive function. Remember how I said that it's a skill set, right? It's a set of mental processes. All right. So these are skills that your child is not born with. Okay. Yet, executive function is something that they have the potential to develop. So it's a set of mental processes that basically your child develops over their childhood, starting even in their early years of age 3, age 4, age 5. Every year of development, there should be a set of mental processes that are building upon to build those independent skills, right? When we think about a 3-year-old, you're working on snapping, buttoning, zipping, putting their jacket on independently, right? And then when they get into early kindergarten, it's getting dressed independently, right? So again, these are functions and processes that you are teaching your child along the way. However, if you are a parent that you feel like you keep teaching different mental processes and they're not clicking, then there's something going on. There's a root problem of why your child is struggling with learning these mental processes. And so I like to really use the picture of an iceberg, where if you look at the tip of the iceberg, right, I always say those are the symptoms and those are the things that you're experiencing. Okay. So lack of motivation, difficulty organizing and planning, difficulty processing and retrieving information, lack of concern or empathy for people or children, inability to learn from consequences of past actions, or inability to learn just simple tasks, right? From them making their lunch and having their lunch ready for the next day to them getting dressed. It can be even simple processes that you've been working on for a long time. And then can cause like socially inappropriate behaviors or just unaware that there's even a problem. Many times, parents will say, my child seems like they're shocked that I'm yelling at them for not getting ready and not being prepared. And yet, I feel like I'm having the same conversation over and over again. Well, those again are symptoms. Those are the visible symptoms that you're experiencing. But what you can't see is you can't see how your child's brain is processing information, right? And so to have optimal learning and optimal social and emotional development, you have to have optimal processing in the brain to take place. It's all about how your child's brain is processing information. All right. I say a connected brain is a teachable brain. And to have a connected brain, you have to have optimal processing taking place. So, how does your child's brain be able to have optimal processing? Well, at Brain Balance, we first look at things from a developmental perspective. All right. And so we go all the way down to the foundation of development, which is what we call primitive reflexes. Now, primitive reflexes, every baby's born with them. They facilitate in the birthing process. They're involuntary motor movements that every baby has. If you actually watch a baby and you have them laying on their back, they're constantly moving their arms and their legs. Okay, they're constantly moving. And those primitive reflexes are there because that's helping facilitate that baby's ability to be able to move. They're involuntary motor movements. Because the brain grows and develops through motor development, but also through sensory development. So what your child sees, hears, smells, and feels develops the brain, and motor develops the brain. So primitive reflexes, because you're in a baby, their brain isn't fully developed, all right? They have these survival reflexes, right? And so they really are able to function and survive because of these involuntary reflexes. But here's the thing: as your child's brain is developing, all right, through their sensory systems, so what they see, hear, smell, and feel, and through gross motor development and fine motor development, all right, these primitive reflexes should be inhibited, meaning that as the brain is developing neurotypically, the brain doesn't need these survival reflexes any longer. But oftentimes, children that struggle with executive functioning and children that either have a diagnosis or they may not have a diagnosis, but they are struggling with executive functioning, oftentimes we find that these children still have active primitive reflexes. And active primitive reflexes is a sign and a symptom of underdevelopments in the brain, meaning that they can have underdevelopments perhaps in their visual system. They could have underdevelopments in their auditory system. They could have underdevelopments in their ability to physically feel their body or even their ability to smell. Which, if you have underdevelopments in any of your sensory systems, then that's going to impact the way the brain processes because children learn through their sensory systems. And then there could be a weakness in gross motor functions, body awareness, balance, coordination. Maybe you see that there's a weakness in fine motor functions related to handwriting, but also the visual system has a lot of fine motor movements in the eyes, which can really impact the development of the brain. So if there are any weaknesses in any of these areas, your child still has some primitive reflexes that are active. Your child may have some weaknesses in some of their sensory systems. Your child may have a weakness in fine motor development, gross motor development. All of that impacts the way that your child's brain is processing. And if there's a weakness in processing, there's going to be a weakness in learning these mental processes that are related to executive functioning skills. And so that's why we look at their brain function, because this is something that is really key and critical for overall success. So the bottom line is that when you have retained primitive reflexes, it can impact the development of sensory systems very differently, which if there's a weakness in sensory systems from visual processing, auditory processing, fine motor, body awareness, then look how it impacts executive functioning skills. It can impact their multitasking and their independent skills and goal setting. It can impact them professionally and socially with family, siblings, and peers. It can impact their focus and attention and their information retrieval and overall ability to be able to process. So the bottom line is that when all systems are working together, the brain is optimized for accurate processing related to the world around them. When there are underdevelopments in the brain, then there's going to be a weakness in learning these mental processes that are needed for executive functioning. All right. And so that's where you have to look at brain function, because again, a connected brain is a teachable brain. And when there are underdevelopments in any of these areas, their brain isn't able to learn optimally. All right. So here's a poll question. Has anyone discussed with you the impact of primitive reflexes that they have on development of executive functioning skills? Because it is something that we do look at brain balance. It's a key element, but it's also a key element where it impacts the development of their sensory systems and it impacts the development of their motor systems. And so again, all of that can impact processing in the brain. So sure enough, 70% of you guys are saying no, that this is a first for you to hear the impact of primitive reflexes. So here's what the research says, is that when you have difficulty with behavior, focus, memory retention, academics, life skills, and social skills, that it often comes down to a lack of brain connectivity. And that is what Brain Balance specializes in, is we really specialize in developing a brain that is teachable, but also optimizing the brain's connectivity. Because when you have optimal connectivity in the brain, you'll have a teachable brain. And so these executive functioning skills can become easier. So, of course, I'm sure many of you guys are saying, okay, how do we strengthen brain connectivity? Because that's really what the root cause of why your child is struggling is that when there's a lack of brain connectivity, it's going to impact executive functioning. So, again, just like I shared with you, we look at things from a developmental perspective. We really want to look at, does your child have any primitive reflexes? If they do, we need to integrate those reflexes to where those reflexes are not active any longer. Oftentimes children that have primitive reflexes, they have a short fuse. They can be emotionally dysregulated pretty easily. They can have high stress. They can have frequent meltdowns, even because their nervous system can become easily dysregulated due to the fact that they have active primitive reflexes. Because remember, these should have been inhibited by 12 months to 18 months of age. So these primitive reflexes should not be active any longer. However, when they are active, it can cause your child to shift from what we call the parasympathetic, or the rest and digest, or the ability to reason and critical think area of the brain, and it shifts their brain into fight, flight, or freeze, which inhibits reasoning, it inhibits critical thinking, and their nervous system is in a state of stress. So if your child's nervous system is in a state of stress, that is something that can be really challenging when you're trying to teach them new skill sets. So again, we want to look at, do they have active primitive reflexes? Then we also look at their sensory systems. How does your child see? The motor movements of their eyes. Are they able to fixate their eyes? We also look at their auditory system, auditory perception and auditory processing, as well as visual perception and visual processing. We also want to look at, do they physically feel their body? Because that has a lot to do with spatial awareness and body awareness and connecting to what they're feeling versus what they're thinking. If they do not physically feel their body, they're going to be disconnected from what they feel, but also they're going to be disconnected of what others feel. And that's something that can really impact the development of empathy. Also, we look at, again, their ability to be able to learn, which is key for multisensory processing. So when we're looking at processing, we're really looking at, when your child's at school, they're having to listen to the teacher, look at the board, take notes. They're having to utilize multiple sensory inputs simultaneously at the same time. How well is that brain organizing all of that sensory input? When there are underdevelopments in the brain, okay, that's going to cause a weakness in multisensory processing. And then that will cause a weakness in their ability to learn, their ability to follow directions. And at the end of the day, we need optimal connectivity in the brain, which is called synchronization of the brain. And when we have optimal connectivity, when there are no primitive reflexes, their sensory systems are functioning optimally, their body awareness is strong, their core strength, their gross motor skills, their coordination is strong, their fine motor functions are strong, then you're going to see that brain is processing optimally, where they are able to follow directions, where they are able to learn these executive functioning skill sets. And when you have synchronization in the brain, you have appropriate behavior, you have their ability to learn academically, you have their ability to learn socially and emotionally, and you have better focus and attention. So that's why we look at all of these areas, because it's really key. It's all about connectivity in the brain. It's all about processing in the brain. So again, at Brain Balance, we strengthen brain connectivity by using a unique combination of exercises that impact both sensory and motor systems at the same time. What the research says is that you have to actually have multiple sensory inputs simultaneously with increased intensity over a period of time, meaning that we have to activate their brain through their visual system, through their auditory system, through even smell, even through tactile stimulation, even through strengthening their motor systems, gross motor, fine motor. All of that is really key and critical to strengthen overall brain connectivity. Because the reality is that your child learns through their senses, right? You learn through your visual system, your ability to smell, which is tied to memory. You have to learn through fine motor, gross motor, tactile, auditory. All of these need to be functioning optimally to have optimal processing in the brain. When your sensory and motor systems are working together at optimal levels, that ability to function and focus can improve. And that is the good news. That's what I want to share with you tonight. No matter if you have a young child that's 3 years old or 4 years old, or you have an adult that you're concerned about, the good news is that the brain can change throughout a person's entire life. It's called the study of neuroplasticity, where we can develop new neural pathways in the brain, or what I like to call highway systems in the brain. Imagine your child having a 2-lane highway, right? Like, we've all been in traffic. And when there's a 2-lane highway and you're in traffic, you're sitting for a long period of time. But when there's an 8-lane highway or a 10-lane highway, right, that you're able to move a lot faster. Well, neural pathways in the brain are like that. The more connections your child has in the brain, the better the processing of the brain. The more that brain is able to synchronize and be able to process their sensory systems and their motor systems. So here is a question for you. Do simple tasks take your child much longer than they should to complete? Do you often feel like you have to micromanage your child with simple tasks? This is something that we often hear when we work with families in brain balance. Do you feel like you're that helicopter parent? And when you're that helicopter parent, you're having to think, can my child be independent? What if I'm not here? What's going to happen if I'm not here walking alongside them? Many times when I talk to parents in the center, they say that's what keeps me up at night, is just the level of, or the lack of independence. And I'm just concerned about my child's future, right? So sure enough, 97% say yes, simple tasks take your child much longer than they should complete. And 98% of you guys are saying that you often feel like you're having to micromanage your child with simple tasks. And I get it, because I hear it, in our centers every day. And it's daunting. I had a mom tell me the other day, she was like, I was not expecting to go back to 5th grade, and that's something that we often hear, right? It's like you feel like you're in school again as a parent. And yet you're like, I've been there and done that. I don't need to do that again, right? So here are some things that you can do at home, all right? One of the things that I do encourage parents is that make learning fun. And here are just some examples of how you can build executive functioning skills by doing some at-home activities, or you can really measure where is your child's independent skills. So for example, planning a picnic for the family, right? It has to do with finding the location of where you're going to do the picnic. Being able to organize what the lunch is going to be or the dinner is going to be, right? What food are they going to bring? How many people are coming? So how much do they need related to food? It also has to do with planning and working memory. But it's that multi-step process that is really key for executive functioning. Also, if you have a middle schooler or a high schooler, where they have to cook and learning how to follow a recipe. And again, looking in the pantry and seeing what food you have, and finding a recipe that would match that food. Or if they pick out a recipe and they have to go to the grocery store and they have to be able to, shop. Right? In the grocery store, there's different aisles with different categories. Are they able to categorize and look at the different categories in the aisles? Or are they wandering, and roaming through the grocery store and it's taking a whole lot longer than it should, right? But that's something that you can also look at. And then also creating a weekly goal schedule. There are some things that we have for you guys tonight. These are helpful handouts. It'll be in the chat, but it'll also be emailed to you. And this provides you different games you can play that activate the brain for learning and developing executive functioning skills. Of course, physical activity also helps develop the brain, which is really key for brain development, which will also eventually help develop executive functioning skills. Or if you have an older child, middle school, high school, where there's a brain detangular exercise to really help them be able to think through their thought processes, perhaps what their procrastinations are versus what the goal is, and why are they procrastinating? What is causing them anxiety and fear about it? Perhaps they're frustrated. So that's just a simple worksheet that we have available for you. Again, it's in the chat. But I will tell you that all of our centers also have more helpful resources. And that if you call and contact the local center that's near you and tell them that you participated in this webinar and give them your story, tell them what you're personally dealing with. Because when they can hear what you're personally dealing with, they can provide more customized resources for you. But these are some other helpful resources on how to activate the brain, how to develop the brain for learning these executive functioning skills. So we have this whole set of tips on self-esteem, but then also we have a whole set of, just from music to smells to motor activities and motor breaks, all these different things that can help you related to homework time, related to just incorporating it throughout their day, which is activating their brain several times a day. So there's more resources that are available when you reach out to the local center near you. They even have more documents that they can send you, but also you sharing with them your personal situation will help them be able to guide you to the next best step. And that leaves us with, what is the next step? If you say, Amanda, what you've shared tonight is so true for my family, and I'm at my wit's end, and we've tried a lot of things. I've tried a lot of worksheets, I've tried a lot of strategies, setting timers, setting reminders, and it's just not working. Well, then I would encourage you to go ahead and book an assessment. This is where you actually can book an appointment with every center that is participating, and they can look and consider, does your child have any primitive reflexes? Where is their sensory systems related to perception versus processing? Where is their strength in brain function? And are there weaknesses in brain function that impacts overall processing in your child's brain? They're going to be able to look at your child's motor systems, gross motor, fine motor. They're going to be able to look at their motor movements of the eyes, specifically for focus and attention, but the motor movements of the eyes specifically for reading and being able to copy things off the board and take notes. So there's a lot of information that they can provide you that gives you an understanding of why your child is struggling. So you can look at where their strengths are, and then are there any weaknesses in brain function that's impacting that cross communication of the brain, that's impacting overall processing of the brain, which is going to impact their ability to learn. So this is something that is super helpful for parents, is just to take the next step of getting answers, perhaps specifically about your child, why they are struggling. Reach out to them. Again, they can provide specific resources for you, but also you can book an appointment with them. And then that will be where you can meet with the director while your child is being assessed, and you can really develop a plan of action. Every plan is customized based on what your child needs and based on your family situation. We have several options. We have options from at-home programming to in-center programming. We serve from age 4 years old all the way through adults. We launched an adult program about 2 years ago, and we've seen incredible results even with the adult program. And many of the adults that come to us, they're concerned with their lack of executive functioning. You know, they're struggling with being able to follow through, being able to maintain goals, being able to stick to a plan. Maybe they're struggling relationally as well. So that is something that is super helpful, is that we do have programs for all ages, from at-home programs to in-center programs, and everything is customized based on what you need and what your child needs to really be able to get better connectivity in the brain, better processing in the brain, so then your child can learn these executive functioning skills that are going to be needed for the rest of their life. You know, this is definitely something that I'm passionate about, because it is a set of skill set that your child needs for the rest of their life. And so if they're struggling in elementary school and they're struggling in middle school and they're struggling in high school, I guarantee you they will struggle in adulthood. So take the next step and be able to get answers specifically about your child. And that's going to be super helpful for you. And it gives you a framework of being able to understand why your child is struggling, that it's not just their behavior, that they're just being oppositional, or that they're just, just being defiant to be defiant, or they're just a strong-willed child. We hear that all the time, and that's really not the case. Typically, children deep down in their heart, they want to please, they want to be seen, they want to be known, and they really do want to be successful, and they want to be celebrated. And so that is something that is really key, is that if you feel like you're always having to micromanage and constantly having to discipline and it's not working, then I would highly encourage you to take the next step and call one of the centers. So we do have a few minutes for some questions. And so again, if you had a question, put it in the Q&A. And we have some moderators on that will be asking a few questions tonight, and I will answer them live for you.
Awesome. Thanks, Amanda. How long does a student typically need to be in the program before they start to see change?
Sure. Well, you'll start seeing change pretty quickly within the first few weeks. Now, when it comes to change in executive functioning skills, that's a journey, and we tell you that's a journey. But we really, when we look at development, you have to see changes in those primitive reflexes need to be integrated. So that's where, again, we are assessing and looking to see, are those primitive reflexes becoming integrated as they're in brain balance? Then we have to see improvements in their motor skills, gross motor, fine motor. We have to see improvement in their sensory system, their visual system, their auditory system. So we tell you exactly what changes you need to be looking for as they go through the program. So yes, you will see changes pretty quickly, but the long-term goal, right, towards the end of their program is where you're going to really start seeing better focus, attention, the ability to learn these executive functioning skills that we're talking about. So many times I'll have moms say, "Oh my gosh, he cleaned his room for the first time. I told him once and it was done." Like those are things, those are little small victories along the way that you see. Or, "Oh my goodness, he had his homework done before I came home from work," or she was able to organize and get ready for school the next day. So there are little snapshots of things that you see along the way. But again, to develop the brain and to improve processing in the brain and to improve connectivity in the brain, there's a process, right? We have to improve development. And so it's definitely something that happens over time, but we are working with you to have you look for the changes that you need to see along the way. So that's a great question.
Thanks, Amanda. Another really great question. If a family is seeing that their child has a really high IQ and they perform really well at some academic subjects, but they're really struggling with effort and attention and focus, is this something that we commonly see?
Yes. We actually serve a lot of children that are gifted. Because again, when your child's brain is functioning in certain areas above their chronological age, and then maybe there are underdevelopments taking place in other areas, think about it. That brain's not able to cross communicate effectively and efficiently. And what it's called is it's actually called a functional disconnection in the brain. And so basically, we have to look at, okay, where are the areas of weakness and development? Where are there underdevelopments taking place? And then we focus on those areas because we want those areas to become just as strong as their gifts and as their talents, because we need cross communication of the brain. We need connectivity in the brain. For example, it's almost like as if you have one area of the brain functioning on Wi-Fi and it's functioning really fast and able to process really fast. And then there's another area of the brain that's functioning on dial-up because there are underdevelopments taking place. Then those two areas aren't able to cross communicate effectively and efficiently because they're not able to be in sync and on the same speed. And so that is definitely something that we specialize in at Brain Balance. And it's something that we do see very often. We actually serve many children that are gifted. So that's a great question. I think we have time for one more question.
Fantastic. If a family is thinking about coming in and taking that first step with an initial appointment, could you give a little bit of an idea of how long that takes and what that might be like?
Sure. So typically you plan on being there about an hour and a half to 2 hours most. And of course, basically your child will spend some time with one of our assessors. And while they're being assessed, then you're spending time with the director. And then that's where you're sharing kind of your story, your journey, what you guys have tried, what your main concerns are. And then together with that director, you're developing a plan of action. And like I said, there's lots of different options. We want to serve every family. We want to give as many children the opportunity to be able to grow and develop and to learn optimally. So there's a lot of different options. And so that's where you will meet with the director and then go over and develop a plan of action. And then you will be able to get the results. Sometimes it's not the same day, but you will be able to hear where your child's functioning and what the customized plan would be. And so different centers, organize their schedule differently, but you'll definitely have really good information of understanding why your child is struggling and then what the plan of action would be to improve connectivity in the brain and improve overall cross communication of the brain. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. Again, next month is ADHD Awareness Month, and we are actually going to be talking about ADHD in the brain. So if you have a family member, you have a friend, of course, you will get this webinar. We will record. We've been recording this webinar, so you will get this webinar sent to you. Feel free to share it. Share it with your spouse. Share it with friends, family. But then also next month, we're going to be talking about ADHD in the brain because it is ADHD Awareness Month. And so we do different hot topics every month. And so that's next month's plan of action. So join us next month if that would be helpful for you. But most importantly, call one of the centers, take the next step to get answers why your child specifically is struggling. And again, there is hope. Your child's brain can develop all the way through adulthood. So even if you're an adult and you're struggling, there's a program for you. And again, better connectivity in the brain is a teachable brain, right? A connected brain is a teachable brain. And then that's when your child will be able to learn and grow socially, emotionally, and academically. Again, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And we look forward to seeing you maybe next month. Thanks, everyone.